Chapter 2. I could smell burgers and french fries in the cafeteria. Mr. Hungry was hollering loud in my stomach, so I didn't think anything else about the boy until he showed up on the lunch line in front of me. I watched him take a fish sandwich, french fries, and chocolate pudding. The fish sandwiches were for the kids that didn't like burgers, and usually, at the end of lunch period, there were a whole lot of fish sandwiches left. I wrinkled my nose at his tray and tried to grab 2 burgers. "You know the rules, Franny," Miss Costa, the lunch lady, said. "Come back when you're done with the first one." "I was just trying to save myself a trip," I said, putting a burger back. The boy looked over his shoulder and smiled at me again. Then he went and sat over in the corner under the loudspeaker. I sat down across from Maribel Tanks only because it was right next to Samantha. "Have you lost your mind?" I whispered to Samantha. Samantha just looked at me with one of her eyebrows raised, and I knew she was thinking what she always saying, which was, "I'm not the one that doesn't like Maribel. That's you." Me and Samantha went back to first grade together. One day, I was just this little kid alone in the first grade, coming into class a month after everyone. For a whole week, I didn't have a single friend. And then the next week, there was Samantha walking over to me saying, "Do you want to play?" Even though we weren't the kind of friends that always spent every single second together and dressed alike and stuff like that, we hung real tight at school. Me and Maribel never played. We hardly even talked. She had gone to private school, and then in 4th grade, that school closed, and since her parents didn't want to send her across the highway for private school, she came to Price. But to hear her tell it, you'd think she was still in some high and mighty private school, always finding some kind of way to drop it into a conversation, always wrinkling her nose at me like she couldn't even believe we had to share the same air. I looked over at the boy. He had his head bent over his food like he was praying. "I can't believe this nasty lunch costs money," Maribel was saying. She took a loud sip of milk, then stirred it around with her straw like it was some kind of special drink. "When I was at the Casey school, we could bring our own lunches or eat the lunch the school made, and that lunch was always delicious." I gave Samantha a look, but she wouldn't give me a look back. Everybody at our school got lunch for free except Maribel Tanks. My mama said that was just Maribel's mama putting on airs. Maribel's mama owned Tanks Groceries, but we didn't shop there because the prices were way too high. Even for things like eggs, which should have cost regular everywhere, at Tanks they cost 20 cents more. And Mama said that's 20 cents more than she was going to pay for them. She said those high prices were just more Tanks putting on airs. Mama said that one day the Tanks were going to go put on so many airs, they'd just up and float away. I don't know what about all that. But when Mama got to talking about people, I liked to listen. My grandmother always said Mama had the gift of gab and that I inherited it. I didn't know about all that either. I thought of myself as more of a listener than a talker, except with stuff like math and science and geography. Then I'm a stare out the window kind of person. Maribel took another loud sip and turned to look at the boy. He was sitting by himself at the end of a table, just looking down at his tray as he stuffed food into his mouth. The sadness tried to creep back up in me, so I started talking real fast to push it down again. "You'd think they'd assign him a partner or something," I said. "Like who?" Maribel said. "You?" "No, like another boy or something. That doesn't even make sense, him sitting by himself like that, all new and everything." Samantha nodded. "Then go sit with him," Maribel said. "Go be a good Samaritan. We collected coats at the store for poor kids. That's my good deed for the year." She looked over at the boy again. "That coat he's wearing looks like one of the ones we gave out, too. Don't know why he's wearing it in this hot lunchroom, though." "Oh, hush the hole in your head already." I took another bite of burger and glared at her while I chewed. "Well, at least I only got one hole in my head," she said. Samantha smiled at that, even though it wasn't even a tiny bit funny. "He came into the store yesterday," Maribel said. "By himself. Maybe he likes it that way, and he bought a ham and cheese hero with extra mayo, some cupcakes, and a soda. That's all. And then when he paid for it, he used mostly pennies. That made my mama so mad." "What's wrong with pennies?" I said, taking another big bite before swallowing all of the last one. "Pennies are money like anything else." Maribel sighed, one of those trying to sound like a grown-up sounds. "Oh, Franny." That's all. Just, "Oh, Franny," with all that air around it. "Oh, Franny, nothing. Pennies are money. Oh, Maribel Tanks." Maribel just rolled her eyes at me, then let them slide back over to the boy. "Pennies are money," Samantha said. "You got 100, you got $1. "Yeah," Maribel said. "Try counting out 210 of them and have your hands sticking with that old sweaty penny smell." She made a face, wiping her hand against her shirt like the smell was still on it. "Anyway, it's strange. You don't see white boys at this school. Much as I hate to say it, Trevor's right. That boy belongs across the highway with the other white people." "It's the 1970s, I said. "Not the 50s. There's no more segregation, remember?" "Try telling that to the people on the other side of the highway," Maribel said. "Or the people on this side. It's strange. Strange that he's coming to this side where he doesn't belong." It was strange, but I wasn't going to agree with Maribel about it. "Who belongs anywhere?" Samantha said. She unfolded a tissue to blow her nose. When she blew it, she leaned down and away from the table like I wouldn't have thought of doing. She even excused herself afterward. "I mean," she said, sitting back up and tucking the tissue all delicate-like into her bag, "he belongs where he belongs. If he ended up here, then that's where he belongs." Maribel rolled her eyes again. "Well, if he comes into my store with those pennies again, I'm not taking them. He better go find some dollars somewhere." Maribel's hair was straightened and curled under, hanging down her back and over her shoulders. She ran her fingers through it while she stared at the boy, her eyebrows bent all out of shape. Maribel was Ray Ray's cousin on his daddy's side, but the only resemblance between them was they both had really smooth brown skin. My own skin was dark brown too, but it wasn't all smooth and pretty like Ray Ray's and Maribel's. It was just regular, like my hair. Mama had tried to put some heat to it to straighten out the kink just once. When I looked in the mirror after she'd done it, I felt like a stranger to myself. After that, I just let my hair do what it wanted to do and mostly kept it in braids. Once in a while, I'd pick it out into an afro like the teenagers wore, but if Mama saw it that way, she'd snatch it right back into a braid, telling me if I wanted to wear my hair like a teenager, I needed to be a teenager. Sometimes she didn't make the least bit of sense. The afro pick had a red, black, and green black power fist on it. Mostly, I just kept it in my back pocket with the fist sticking out. That was the way a lot of kids carried their afro picks. Mama frowned when she saw it. "It's not your store," I said. "It's your mama's." "It's my inheritance." I guess that's better than inheriting a gab gift, but I didn't say anything. After that, we ate mostly without doing a whole lot of talking about the boy. Samantha ate her food delicately, all ladylike. Every way that she was ladylike, I wasn't. I looked down at my turtleneck. It was light blue, but a big drop of greasy ketchup had spilled on it. I took a deep breath. Sometimes I wish Samantha and me could trade places and I could see what it felt like to be like her, to be all delicate and careful and sure like that. I moved a little closer to her, pulled my napkin off my tray and wiped at the stain. It just smeared to a light brown. Maribel looked at the spot, made a face, and looked away. Later on, when we were all out on the schoolyard, me and Samantha split a chocolate cupcake. Just as we were finishing up, standing there, licking the frosting off our fingers, Ray, Trevor, Chris, and some other guys went over to the boy. He was sitting on the ground with his arms wrapped around his knees, not even caring that the ground was all wet. He had on dark brown boots and was kicking his heel into the snow, just minding his own business. "What's your name anyway?" Ray said. And the boy looked at him, kind of squinty-eyed. like a million things were going on inside his own head that were miles and miles away from all of us. When I was a baby, Mama said old people would look at me and say, "Oh, Lord, that child's got an old spirit. She's been here before." It was the way you looked at everyone and everything, Mama said, like you were taking every little bit and piece of it in. I'd never really understood what they were talking about until now. "My boy Ray Ray asked you your name," Trevor said. "You deaf or something?" Ray Ray started hitting at his own ears and making strange mumbling sounds. I flinched a little bit. It was no good when people said things like, "You deaf or something." My brother was deaf, and deaf was something. I leaned against the schoolyard fence with Samantha, both of us watching, but neither of us saying anything. Samantha took a napkin from her bag and rubbed the last of the frosting from her fingers. She offered it to me, but I just held out my hand, showing her how clean I'd licked it. Most days I broke away from the fence and went and jumped rope or played handball with other kids, but Samantha was always by the fence when I returned. Sometimes she was bent over her tiny Bible. I could see Maribel out in the schoolyard doing Down, Down, Baby with 3 other girls. "Down, down, baby, down by the roller coaster. Sweet, sweet baby, I will never let you go. Jimmy, Jimmy, Cocoa Pop, Jimmy, Jimmy, pow. I know a lady." Maribel's hand went the wrong way and she was out. I couldn't help smiling. When I looked back, Trevor was still talking junk. The sign for believe flashed into my head the way Sean signed it, his pointer finger against the side of his head like he was saying, "Think," then his hands coming together like the sign for Mary. I stood there thinking for the first time about how perfect that word was, to have a thought in your head and then to marry it, to take it into your heart forever. "I can't believe Trevor's still messing with that boy," I whispered, hoping I hadn't just made the sign. Sometimes I did that, talked to myself in sign language. Ray Ray made some silly fake signs with his hands, then grunted. "I guess we gotta go talk to him like a deaf guy, huh?" he said. The other boys laughed, but when Ray Ray looked over and saw me watching, he stopped, put his hands in his pockets, and got quiet. The boy just looked up at all of them. Then he did something amazing. He took his hands out of his pocket and signed, "No, I'm not deaf." Then he looked over at me and smiled, like he'd known all along I was standing over by the fence watching him. I looked away real fast, hoping he hadn't seen the surprise on my face. "Are those real signs?" Samantha asked me, "or is he just being jive and faking it?" "It's real," I said. "He's saying he's not deaf, that's all." "Well, how does he know that?" "How am I supposed to know? I don't know that boy." Maribel had come back over to the fence and was standing on the other side of Samantha. "It's not like you have to be a genius or something to know some signs," she said. But Samantha looked at the boy like she was seeing something new and magical in him. "You look like Jesus," Trevor said. Then he kicked the boy's boot and said, "You better learn how to answer a soul brother when they be talking to you, Jesus boy." "He does look like Jesus," Samantha said slowly. "Kind of, I guess," Maribel said. "There used to be this boy at the Casey school who looked like Michael Jackson, but he couldn't even dance." I rolled my eyes. "Maribel thinks if you don't have a neck, your head would just float away." Samantha smiled, but she didn't take her eyes off the Jesus boy. He was looking down at the ground. After a few minutes, he lifted his head a little bit and stared calmly past everything and everybody. His lips pressed together, his hair lifting up in the wind. I tried to see all the things he was seeing, but all I saw was the highway past the schoolyard, a tiny dot of an airplane, the sun slipping back behind some clouds, and miles of wet gray sky.